Um, so welcome everyone to the Saturday afternoon Aquarian series, but I can see two people in our group here that is not Saturday afternoon at all.
Yeah.
Speaker, Catalina Isaza Cantor, did I say it right, Catalina?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. And she's actually from Colombia, but right now, being that it's such a small world, she's actually in Chennai at Adyar, and she's on the premises of the Theosophical Society at Adyar. And that's a screensaver, by the way, but because it is 5 a.m. there. So, and Jeffrey, it's like 9 or 8 in the morning for you, I think. Something, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
8:30, yeah.
8:30 for you, got it. So some of us up early, some of us up late, etc. And so our topic today is the language of the future. So we have a fearless person here, Catalina, who's going to talk about the language of the future. She's actually a translator, a beautiful translator, just an excellent translator, by the way. And she can get her mind into these spiritual subjects and just effortlessly lay them out in other languages. So that's quite a gift, and we're quite privileged to have her today. Let me share my screen real quick, and I am going to, okay, so the language of the future is today. We have a quote here from the Almanac. As we all know, this whole Aquarian series is based on the Aquarian Almanac. And the quote for the week is, "The soul must learn the sacred language of cosmic and theurgic sacrifice, which is the basis of all spiritual alchemy and noetic magic in nature."
Hello to everyone today. Some of you are good night, other good morning. In my case, it's good early morning. It's still dark here. I'm really happy to join all of you friends that are gathered today here. I feel not only happy, but very honored to share with you today, thanks to Jonathan's invitation, and humbly sharing some of my thoughts on the topic that he proposed, that is the language of the future. But before beginning to share those thoughts, I always feel compelled to make some seconds of silence in order to connect with the inner self, the higher source, and among all of us, since we are not physically together. But we know that the power of thought and this connection that all of us share I feel that with this moment of silence, we connect us even more. So just some seconds of silence. So. Especially feeling in the heart the gratitude to be together today. Okay, so, well, when I began to think about the language of the future, a lot of ideas and thoughts began to come to my mind. So I just decided to sit down for a while, make an introspection, and try to visualize what or how the language of the future might be. And while this question can be answered from many perspectives, of course, the linguistical perspective is there, a lot of intellectual perspectives. What I felt at that moment is that the fact that all of us are in a theosophical circle, where the common goal is the creation of a nucleus of universal brotherhood or siblinghood, everyone. The approach from unity, from fraternity, is fundamental when thinking about a language of the future or for the future. So we can think of the language of the future as one that leads us to that fraternity or that brotherhood, or that makes it possible, or that is a product of the brotherhood, or all of the above at the same time. And if we examine a little bit the history of modern civilization, we see that since probably 17th century or maybe before, there have been several attempts to create what has been called an international language, a universal language, with the aim of enabling common communication or understanding. For instance, I'm just going to mention a couple of examples. One of the first attempts in the West to create an international language to communicate across borders was made in 1661 with the creation of a philosophical or universal language that was called Art of Science. It didn't work for a long time, and time passed, and another attempt was made in 1668 with the aim of replacing Latin. Latin by the time was the international language of Western European scholars. So it was linked to a kind of status, a kind of group of people for almost 1,000 years. And this language wanted just to create a more common language for a common understanding of all the people. And it was called Royal Character. And during that century, there were a few more attempts, but none succeeded because probably the ground for such languages had not been prepared. Later, in 1879, there was another attempt called Volapük, that is, the meaning is world speech. And it was something that immediately became very fashionable, and it lasted for around 10 years. And in the 10th year, it is said that about 1 million people were using it, which is a big amount of people if we consider the time, 1879. And there was a Congress in 1989, 10 years after that, held in Paris, where everyone at the Congress was speaking it, even the waiters, and that was like a very big triumph for such kind of language. But it began to decline rapidly, particularly because of internal disagreements. So we see again that the ground was not ready for this kind of universal language. And the disagreements of maybe the personality didn't allow this because, as I was mentioning at the beginning, I guess really a universal language has to be in a ground where the fraternity and the brotherhood are the main thing. So really undertaking the search for a universal, or in this case, what all those attempts were to create an artificial language that aimed to be perfect for communication. And this was a very common kind of tentative during a very common goal during the 17th century. And this had to do with the fact that in the 16th and 17th centuries, the linguistic unity of Europe broke down. Not only did national literature begin to appear as a product of national languages, but Europe itself encountered nations whose language had no kinship with Latin, such as those of indigenous tribes in America or those of the Chinese Empire. So we can see that the more the frontiers became wider, the more they were trying to create some kind of common language that were able to make everyone understand each other. So here we can feel that the more we feel that we are more connected, the more that need of common communication is there. And perhaps one of the most reasons, and maybe some of us here have heard about it, and I have even tried to learn it, my parents used to learn, is the Esperanto. That was a language that was established in 1907 and currently has about 200,000 people that speak it. And Also, okay, it's still there. There are a lot of Esperantist association, etc. But still, Esperanto has not reached that goal of being the universal language. So throughout history, we see official and common languages of empires also and eras, such as Latin in the Roman Empire, French in one that was the intellectual language for some centuries. Currently, English is considered like a official international language also, in which we can communicate in many places diplomatically, etc. And the European Union also acknowledged different languages as official language of the European Union, etc. Here in India, for instance, English is one of the official languages, Hindi is the other official language. In order to try, because here in India, in every state that you go, you find a different language. So they try to establish two official languages in order to make to make easier the common communication. And even Google has been working for years on a simultaneous translation project, a sort of Tower of Babel 2.0. And anyway, there have been a lot of attempts to create that universal language that at the moment that are created are seen like this kind of language of the future that can lead to this common understanding. And many of these languages have become important due to commercial, cultural issues, etc. And we try to reduce language barriers by becoming more involved in the cultures and tradition of other regions also, because we know that the language normally is linked to a culture. So a language tells about of how the culture, the society that speaks that language is. This is another thing that has maybe been a difficulty in creating a universal language, because the language tells the story, the history of the people. So maybe by trying to create an artificial language, when I was reading about this, many people feel that their identity is lost when they try to communicate in this kind of language. So also the cultural aspect is something that we have to take into consideration when we think of creating a universal language. Okay, we try to reduce language barriers by becoming more involved in the cultures, in the tradition, in the regions, but can such integration make them truly global? Well, after looking at some of the aforementioned attempts and seeing that they have not prospered as one will expect, it's worth asking why they have failed. Could it have to do with some inherent human condition? Perhaps it is because they do not really include all possible language and therefore all possible speakers. Could it have to do with the intention with which they are created? Maybe just thinking in commercial purposes, or maybe there is not such altruism and a deeper desire of union from the real goal of the fraternity. Many experts also point that it is very difficult to create a language. And experiments such as Esperanto and other artificial languages do not seem to have any prospect of success on a global scale. So let us examine the following. Underlying the creation of this universal language is the need to transcend difference, to transcend separations, and to create some sense of community, of mutual benefit, of stepping forward to facilitate communication. And perhaps this is because deep within us, we are aware of that common essence that we share. At this point, if we are talking about the language of the future, it is important to understand what is that we share. What is that make us as one? Many of the options that have been proposed are based on an eminently rational proposal that starts from the belief that the universal among human beings is only reason. And therefore, the construction of languages should be governed by rational patterns in the same way that a figure is constructed geometrically. And while indeed, as it is mentioned by Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine, the language is certainly coetaneous with reason, it could never have developed before man became one with the constituent principles in him, which fructified, awakened, and vivified the dormant monastic element in the primitive man. So, if we look at it from a broader perspective, as Theosophy shows us, we know that man and the universe have a septenary nature. So the rational is more related to the lower plane, but it's only a minor component of what we are in our totality. The functioning of the language, as Blavatsky showed us in The Secret Doctrine, depends upon the unification of all principles. So once all these principles were unified in the man, the language was possible. The communication through language was possible. Moreover, in most cases, this lower mental element that has been the only focus of the artificial language that have been created, instead of uniting us, what it really does is to separate us, because we identify so much with our ideas, with our opinions, that we end up creating more conflict and misunderstandings instead of union and common communication. So thinking of a language only from a universal language for the future, only from the perspective of the lower mental, is forgetting about the immense possibility that the human being has as a being with a septenary nature. So it is fundamental to understand the human being as a being of multiple dimensions that is directly connected with the divine and with everything that inhabits the planet. As I mentioned at the beginning, I believe that having in mind that there is a siblinghood, that there is something divine in us that drinks from an eternal and immutable source, is the key to think about any kind of language of the future. It is in the light of that unity that I think we should think about the language of the future, actually. Besides that, as students of Theosophy, we know the immense power that language has for creation. The language we use is vibration, symbol. The world has a creative power, and depending on what quality or intention and nature it is, we are creating our reality. Let us remember what HPB mentions in The Secret Doctrine also. She says, the spoken word has a potency unknown to and suspected and disbelieved in by the modern sages. And such or another vibration in the air is sure to awaken corresponding powers, union with which produces good or bad results, as the case may be. As she adds in another part of The Secret Doctrine. For the sound generates or brings together by attraction, the elements which produce a molecule of ozone, the making of which is beyond chemistry, but within the limits of alchemy. So speech, the world, the sound, the vibration is a reflection of a divine power that is within us all. It is highly regarded in the words scriptures, for instance. In the Bible, the first words of John's Gospel state that in the beginning was the world. And perhaps in the sense of the sound that awakens all things into existence. So if, as The Secret Doctrine shows, with the sounds we use, we can move pyramids. There is a part of The Secret Doctrine that says that through the sound, when correctly used, we can even move pyramids. It is not unreasonable to think that if we understand the language of the future as that which leads us to that fraternity, which accounts for it, which is a product of it, or all of it at the same time, that will be like the language of the future. And thinking a little more deeply about this divine gift of the world that we have, should think deeply that every time we are able to speak and to communicate, we are putting in motion a divine gift that we have been given. And that thinking a little more deeply about this divine gift of the world will lead us to be more aware of the way we use it. Because to pronounce a word is to evoke a thought and make it present. The magnetic potency of human speech is the beginning of all manifestation in the occult world, as the secret doctrine states. And this has to do with the ability of speech to magnetize, to attract. And that is why it is fundamental to use the word with wisdom, not only in moments that we will call sacred, such as spiritual, religious, or a spiritual gathering, but and more than anything else, we should be very aware of use the word wisely in everyday's life, because it is from it that our day-to-day life, that our reality originates. So it is important to be aware not only of the way we use the language, but also of what we say. There are some theories that point out that one of the sources of evolution of communication and language is gossip, because gossip refers to everyday, basic, and instinctive issues of human beings. Well, whether it is true or not, because it has not been completely proven, let us suppose that it's true. These are elements of our lower vehicles, of the densest part of our being, since they are loaded with criticisms, perhaps bad intentions sometimes. So if we take into account that the way we communicate affects directly our reality, it will be worth asking ourselves if gossip, for instance, is creating a positive and truthful atmosphere. If we believe that the hypothesis of gossiping as something that triggered the evolution of the language is correct, then we can observe the world that we have, and we know that the world that we live is a reflection of the language that we use. So we could ask ourselves, okay, is that what we want for the language of the future, or can we try to change the language that we use in the present to begin to build that new reality that we want for the future? So perhaps many of us agree that this could be something that we should think on a daily basis and really try to create that world of fraternity, equality, compassion from the language that we use on our daily basis, because from the present we are building the future. And we must be very careful with what we say when we speak, and even more with the quality of our thinking, because as we know, the thought has a big power and we cannot see it, but in the invisible worlds also there is a big impact from our thoughts that are the previous step to our words. So when we pronounce a word, it has been already cooked in our mind, in our thoughts. So I think if we are concerned with the building of a language for the future, we should be very aware of the language we use in our daily life. And in this order of ideas, this language of the future should have, without a doubt, characteristics such as truthfulness, kindness, beauty, wisdom, consciousness. It should be a harmless languages, putting into practice this ahimsa, or not violence. It should be a positive language, a respectful one, assertive language, effective also and precise, to the point, and not using unnecessary energy of excessively talking also, for instance, because also the excess of speech is a waste of energy. So that's why we also should use very wise our words and think about what we speak, and make our word coherent with our thoughts and with our actions, because we know as humans, we think something, then we say another thing, and then we act in a different way. So this, when we think in a language for the future, it should be of coherence between the thought, the speech, and the action also. And it is also important to remember that what we say and how we see and think about the world has to do with what we see and absorb from it, because the two things are intimately related. So the materials we feed ourselves with also create the bodies and the reality we inhabit. Whether it's the physical, the emotional, or the mental body, we must feed ourselves with the best food possible. And of course, our spiritual self, we have to feed our spiritual self with higher vibrations. The things we say are very important, but we also need to pay attention to the things we hear. And unfortunately, again, if we look at the world that surrounds us, we are surrounded by a lot of visual and auditory stimuli that convey not necessarily uplifting things and beautiful things. We listen to some of the lyrics of the music, some kind of literature. This is not a real nourishment for the soul and for the higher mind. So we should be building this kind of vibration in which what we also consume through our senses is of a uplifting nature, of a beautiful nature, of a good nature. It is said that the caliber of a civilization can be measured by the way it uses words. And sadly, we cannot say that in our current civilization, the songs, the TV shows, the movies make a very high use of the language. Sadly, they are still undergoing a moment that is making a very low use of language. So all this vibration, although many people are not all aware of it, are affecting us. Let us remember that from the theosophical point of view, space is not empty. Space is Akasha, and HPV refers to the living atoms of Akasha as the elementals. As we all here have read about the elementals, and that these elementals are, although they are rudimentary, they are powerfully energized by the power of our thoughts. So the mind, everyone's mind is like a very powerful, how do you say, powerhouse of these thought forms. And all the time we are nourishing the elementals that are in the space. So every time we have a thought, we attract the corresponding kind of elementals into our subtle bodies. Whenever we interact from the place of truth, of beauty, or of kindness, compassion, wisdom, love, from the qualities of our higher nature, we attract higher elementals and we create higher elementals, or we nourish those higher elementals. But when we interact from a place of selfishness, of the lower personality, from our instincts, and ensure all the qualities of the lower quaternary, we attract elementals and we nourish elementals of a similar nature. So since through our language and thought we are agents of change, it is important that we are aware of ourselves and our process of self-transformation. Since we are part of the web of one life, any change at a global level has to start from the individual inner work. And in this individual inner work, meditation and self-inquiry are fundamental elements, as well as mindfulness. We are co-creators of the world thanks to and through the language. Mindfulness, be present, aware in the present, instant by instant, is therefore a fundamental ingredient in what will be the language of the future. We can only think the future from the total experience in the eternal present, because this is what builds it. In Theosophy, we are shown that as everything evolves towards the encounter with the source and as it gets closer to that universal consciousness, the forms adapt themselves to be able to provide a better service to the form of consciousness of which they are the physical vehicle. So since we are the carriers of language, and it is its use that differentiates us humans from other animal species and make us beings of a social nature, it is important that we set in motion this evolution in ourselves, this scientific construction, scientific building of character, the spiritual path, the journey of self-transformation. I see it as a journey of scientific construction of character, because it really is this putting into practice, to experience in the daily life what we read or what we study. So that scientific construction of character, that putting in motion in ourselves, that self-awareness, mindfulness, etc., is what is going to help us to carry out this construction of this building of the language of the future. And as a part of that evolution, it is worth asking ourselves if the language or the channel we use for conveying it, that is the voice. In the communication process, this is someone who speaks, someone who receives the message. There is the message, and it is the channel through which the message is conveyed. So it's worth asking if that language or that channel that we use to communicate as a part of the language of the future should also be transformed. So we can see it from a material point of view. And nowadays, there is a lot of people talking about from the perspective technological point of view. And some people say that the language of the future will be programming. For those who are not familiar with programming, computer programming is the art of the process by which the source code of computer program is clean, coded, traced, and protected. So in other words, it's telling the computer what to do. So programming is nowadays used for every app, every program that we use, and it's more actually I used to think of this programming more like a mathematical process. Of course, we know mathematics is also another kind of language, and other people mention that mathematics is kind of a universal language. But programming is more like a language. It works more like language than mathematics, in fact. So that you need to identify how you want to express yourself, to figure out how to convey the message clearly, and then execute it in an organized way. That is the process behind programming. And it is said that as a universal language, in the future, programming will be able to break any linguistic barrier, so that there can be collaboration and propagation of ideas with anyone, anywhere. And that is why it is thought to be the tool to unite us in the future. And in addition, learning to program, some people say that it's also like learning another language. In fact, I was reading in some universities in San Francisco, programming is already being taught in some schools. So learning to program implies thinking from the point of view of effective communication, since it is necessary to think carefully before communicating. And clearness, effectiveness is a characteristic of the language of the future. From the material and technological point of view, there are also who mention that emojis are becoming slowly that universal kind of language, that you don't need to know the specific language, whether German, French, whatever we are talking about, but you can just use the emojis and you are able to convey how you are feeling or what you are thinking, and it's contributing to communication. They are even mentioned the emojis to be like the kind of Esperanto of our time, or the digital Esperanto, something like that. And nowadays, with the emojis, we can transmit emotions, sensations, feeling, only by using these small symbols. But then people say, yes, but it is from programming that makes all these emojis and all these apps becoming possible. So that's why programming is the language of the future. Programming makes possible new application, conversational robots that also are something that is growing. So people goes and talk with a chatbot to solve problems with the computer, etc. And even nowadays for more uses. So programming really is taking a lot of uses to in order to, for instance, allowing us to post on Instagram or Facebook and be able to communicate to the world what we are doing by our images, our posts, and having the possibility to reach a wider audience. All this is helped by programming, but is this really what will make us to have the possibility to make universal fraternity something vivid? Have this possibility of communicating with everyone, posting Facebook, etc., etc., or on the contrary, are all these new tools that materially and mundanely facilitate communication, contributing to isolate us as a society, to move us away from face-to-face interaction and turn us into secluded individuals in a capsule form behind the screen? I do not mean to say that technology does not provide us with wonderful opportunities to shorten distances and times. Actually, right now, thanks to that, we are able to meet from different places in the world and to share together beyond any physical frontier. But from a more profound point of view, in terms of awareness, I feel that internally we are not prepared to take the best advantage of all these technological facilities. And that is why I think that these tools do not constitute a real step towards what will be the language of the future. So the step could be taken if we move into the realm of the perennial in us. As already mentioned, the language of the future is intimately related to the idea of unity, and this will make us think that it is fundamental, that it has common characteristics and that everyone has access to it. For this is something that will endow us with a transforming power. As in the biblical story of Tower of Babel, or Babel, I don't know the pronunciation in English, sorry, Babel, but I guess all of you understand the Tower of Babel, which shows us that all peoples used to speak the same language. That linguistic unity enabled them to collaborate effectively and endow them with immense power. However, the story shows us that when God observed that they were building that great tower and he realized how powerful they have become, he realized that they were immensely powerful because of their ability to communicate. And so before the tower was finished and reached the sky, God made them all speak different language. That story makes me think of two things. First, the potential of humanity to achieve anything when it is united and in consonance, when it communicates through the same language. And second, that when the ego prevails, like the ego of these people building the tower in order to reach the sky, when this ego prevails, separateness increases. For until we are aware that what really unites us must be used for the common good and not for the enhancement of ego and power, the gift of the common language will not be returned to us. So to get that gift returned to us, we have to think in terms of universality and brotherhood. Then as theosophies, it is fundamental to turn to the broader perspective of the spiritual point of view and the divine plan that is evolution. In this sense, we will have that at the time when universal brotherhood is a true fact, the use of sound, of the voice as a channel of communication may no longer be necessary. So it is worth asking whether the language of the future must necessarily occur through the use of language of symbols, of the spoken word, or whether instead it will be a type of language that does not involve visible, audible communication in terms of the lower vehicles, but it is expressed more through the transmission of thought waves. The communication of the future could thus be telepathic in nature, for instance. If so, on one hand, we may no longer need languages, and it will no longer be necessary to try to create international languages. At a time when humanity makes an evolutionary leap towards one of the future races, the languages currently used by our present race will not be necessary because there will be a form of communication that will be heart to heart, soul to soul. As Jonathan was quoting at the beginning, that soul that is trying to connect with the sound of the language of the future. Because we will have reached as humanity a state of greater compenetration and closeness with the elements of our higher triad. To conceive a language of the future within the context of the spiritual vision and the divine plan is fundamental to move away from the concept of language as we know it, because, as the Secret Doctrine says, the language have their phase of growth. They have childhood, grow and far, and then they die, they decay. So a language that does need the limitation of words, that doesn't need the limitation of word, but is transmitted from our most spiritual part, will be in itself a sacred language. It will not use the symbols that limit us, but it will use the divine energy that follows thought and that embraces everything. But while we reach that goal, it is worthwhile to add to those already mentioned some other characteristics of what we can think of the language of the future and what we can do from our present as an individual interested in cooperating with the divine plan. For instance, as an educator, I have been teaching for a long time. I think it is critical to provide a transformative education in which competition, senseless punishments, violence, and mere concern for intellectual knowledge are absent. Instead, an education for cooperation, for compassion, service, fraternity, that fosters collaborative, cooperative, assertive, truthful, harmless communication. And the use of language as parents, as teachers, for this to happen is fundamental. It is important to have assertive communication, respectful parenting, positive parenting or teaching, to be more careful in the use of the words that we communicate to the children. And this applies not only to education, but to all spheres of our lives. Let us also remember that language goes beyond the spoken and written word, and that the way we move, the way we look and gesticulate has a very important impact of what we communicate. Actually, it is even said that a very high percentage of the impact and reach of our messages has to do with the elements of non-verbal communication or non-verbal language, such as voice, look, etc. So in the context of universal language that builds the humanity of the future, we will speak of a language of love with a kind look, a serene smile on the face, an attitude of constant listening and service, readiness to give and receive from the cleanness of our being, with a pure heart, with an awakened intellect, with a spiritual perception without veils. Eleanor Roosevelt used to tell that small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, great minds talk about ideas. And I will add, those who are on the way to transcend the self, the limitation of the physical vehicles into a we, and are able to realize oneness, not only will not need to speak, but their action, their look, and the recognition of that oneness will be enough to communicate. And all of this becomes attainable as we become more connected to the divine essence of which we are part, as we establish an inner life in which we experience the joy of silence. And for example, we concentrate more on purifying the quality of our thoughts, actions, etc., as we have already mentioned. And that if we do this, the help of meditation, the study, the service, the mindfulness is a key thing to reach this. So let us also ask ourselves as students of Theosophy, what could be, for instance, the contribution of an institution like the TS? We have talked about us as individuals, but let us think in terms of organization as the TS. Well, along these lines, there is a letter that is called the Unique Letter of the Mahashohan, in which it is briefly mentioned that the Theosophical Society was proposed as the cornerstone, the foundation of the future religion of mankind. And Madame Blavatsky points out in her Secret Doctrine that there is a natural connection between language and religion, because both lead us to a union, to a communion. They are the products of the need of transcend the barriers to unite. So the fundamental doctrines of all religions are identical in their esoteric meaning, and all language have a common goal to communicate. As Raghavan Iyer mentions, there are many synonyms for theosophy. Theosophy, wisdom, religion, Brahmavidya, Guptavidya, but there is one that he especially highlights as a synonym for theosophy, that is the term Brahma Vak. That is the primordial latent sound and light sound, again, the power of sound. It is a creative, generative power and therefore deeply related to the power of speech. To sound the keynote of Brahma Vak in our lives, then, is to make theosophy a living power to the magic of sound. But I will add that this sound not necessarily needs to be physically audible. We know that the sound is vibration, such as the power of the thought is vibration. So it is this power of the vibration, of the voice of the silence, also we could call it like that, to make this keynote sound in our lives, connects us with that religion of the future, and with it, the future civilization and language. And this happens with that religion of the future, and with it, the future civilization and language. I will quote Iyer again. When we consecrate our entire self to the practical realization of Brahma Vak and the shedding of its pristine light to the path of spiritual self-regeneration in the service of humanity, then that is when we can really think of a civilization of the future, of a language of the future, and of a realization of the divine plan that is the evolution. And with this, I want to end. Sorry, I took a little bit longer. That's all. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that was just magnificent, Dr. Lena. Thank you very, very much. I see the hands going up, so we'll just get straight to them. Judy.
Yes, thank you, Catalina, for a very stimulating talk. I guess I have two questions. There was a big craze about Esperanto in the 1950s and 1960s, that this was going to solve the world language problem because they had all regular verbs and it was very easy to learn, and there were huge meetings. They were even teaching it at Stanford, but it failed very badly, maybe because it didn't have a heart to it. It didn't come from any people. But I think the other issue is that in English, which is a rich language, it's still the language of a warrior trading people. And unlike Sanskrit, which apparently comes from the rishis and adepts, it really can't express metaphysical issues, as Wittgenstein showed. So I guess the question you're raising is, how can we really have a metaphysical language of the heart? That's what I'm getting from your talk.
How come we really have, sorry, I didn't get the word that you say after, how could we really have a?
Did you say?
Can you repeat the last, how can we really have a, I don't know, the middle word language of the heart?
we need a metaphysical language
Oh,
that
metaphysical.
has a heart to it. That, I mean, as Wittgenstein very clearly pointed out, languages like German and English just are, they don't make very good sense when you try to get metaphysical. So, and you try to express many ideas, they break down.
Yes. Actually, I will just go a little bit back on what you said. You mentioned the Sanskrit, and while I was reading on this subject, a couple of texts mentioned that the Sanskrit could be a language of the future because not only is very logical from the scientific point of view. Actually, in Germany, they are teaching, they are taking Sanskrit scholars from India to teach in the field of computers, of this field of language computer and everything, because it's extremely logical, but also because it's extremely metaphysical and philosophical. So one of the things that I read is that Sanskrit could be that kind of language because with one, it has such a logic that from a rational point of view, it's easy to make sense, but also it has such a deepness that you, with one word, you can express so many things. Like when we find words such as we were talking the other day, the motto of the Theosophical Society, Satya Nastya Paradharma, and that it has been translated that it's not religion, higher than true, but then Dharma. I mean, you can, when you go to see the translation of the word Dharma, it expresses a world in itself. So I really think, as you say, that a language of the future needs to have this capacity of telling so much in a few, because that is the other thing. We were talking about language, effective language, that you don't need to waste so many words and so many energy in trying to express, but you go directly to the point, but being able to really say what you feel. And that is why, okay, Sanskrit has that. I don't know Sanskrit. Of course, some Sanskrit words come to us because we read this kind of literature, and there is always this thing that you find the Sanskrit term, and there is a footnote trying to explain all the possible possibilities for that word. But maybe, okay, from the ideal is that's what I say. The ideal will be to reach that point in which we are so compenetrated with our higher self and with each other that we don't even need any kind of physical language to reach that. But that's why maybe with languages that are not so accurate, or as you mentioned, there is not a bigger possibility to express so many things. I guess in order to be able to express more, we can also use the other kind of languages as our verbal language, as our actions, because that will completely complement what we are trying to convey. But really, I don't know if apart from Sanskrit, talking from a metaphysical point of view, there is another language that is so complete and so accurate as language for metaphysical purposes. But yes, every language has its own characteristics. For instance, Latin languages, or that is my feeling when I speak some other languages, and I feel that when I speak in every language, when I am speaking in Spanish, I feel I can express easily some kind of things that I cannot express in English. But when I'm talking in English, I feel I can express other kind of things that in Spanish will take a lot of explanation. Or now that I'm trying to learn Hindi, I feel that it's another universe and other way of expression. Also, when I speak in French, it happens the same. Portuguese, all other language. I was trying to learn Japanese at some point, and it was also. So I feel that's why no language is complete itself to express the multiple dimension of the universe and the human being. But in the meantime, as we are also made of multiple layers, we can try to go beyond the simple physical language and try to find other things in our communication. I don't know if I answered your question, but okay, I just wanted to share this, that your question triggered on me. And
So thank you.
thanks for the question. It was nice.
Yeah.
So we've got a question from Jeffrey. He's gonna ask his question in Japanese. He's gonna test your Japanese.
Oh, I was going to ask where he was going.
日本語は大丈夫ですか?
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, I just want to mention you're talking about Sanskrit. Actually, the Buddha said explicitly, we're not going to have our scriptures in Sanskrit.
Okay.
wanted-
Oh yeah, actually they use.
And Pali was sort of like a pigeon, Sanskrit. So that's an interesting. Another thing regarding Sanskrit is that in the preface to The Voice of the Silence, there's the idea that the Censar is
Oh
something
yes, yes.
like an interesting hybrid between Sanskrit, which is an extremely grammatical language, highly inflected, and Chinese, which does not have grammar.
Oh.
Well, Chinese doesn't have anything that it has no gender, it has no singular, plural. There's no changes in the noun or in the verbs. Everything it depends entirely on syntax, on the order of the words. So English is becoming like Chinese right now. You think about it, like English has gradually shed so much of its grammar. It's the only language in the world that I know that has only one word for you. I mean, there are others.
Singular and plural, yeah.
Right. Tuvu, and we have a lot in Japanese. Well, but one thing I want, I'm a translator too, and so I want to. What are you? Yeah, that's how I feel. What are you translating? And I want to know what is hard, what's difficult about your translating work? How does language, moving from one language into another, what's difficult or interesting about that?
Okay, interesting is to realize that sometimes there are so many possibilities to express one only thing. But the challenge is also to choose which of those possibilities is the one that conveys the idea that the author wants to. Because when you are a translator, I sometimes feel like I am getting into that author's mind and soul, because you really have to try to put, you don't translate only the sentences and that's all. I mean, linguistically, yeah, you have this word means that, or can mean also this, but you have to feel the author. You have to go into his or her own world to try to put in the shoes of the author to be able to really convey what he said. I also like to write a lot, so I'm also a kind of author sometimes. So when I think of, oh my God, when I am a translator, I think, okay, if one of my writings was going to be translated by someone, what would I like that person to really take from it? And sometimes you realize that you have to make choices, no? Whether you choose to be completely accurate in terms of meaning of words, or sometimes you have to choose to convey the word, the real meaning, but for that you have to really understand the world of the author, and maybe sacrifice a little bit the literal meaning of the words, but convey that universe that the author wants to share with people. But for that, really, really, you have to compenetrate a lot with the author, because otherwise you may be a betrayer with the text or something like that.
Produce.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you translate into Spanish or?
I translate mostly into Spanish. Sometimes I also translate into Portuguese. I have made the translation into French also, but my French is very now rusty, so I don't do it anymore. Yes, and when I have to make a talk like this, I write in Spanish and then I translate into English, because I cannot think so much deeply in English yet. So, but that is my own. I translate my own things to English, because I can. If you ask me to do a lecture, I have to think it in Spanish and I translate it into English. But from other people, I translate mostly into Spanish or Portuguese. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and you, what language do you translate?
I translate I translated from Japanese into English, but theosophical
Nice.
works I translate into Japanese, and I translate Agni Yoga books from Russian into English.
Wow, amazing.
I work with a Russian speaking person though to do that. Otherwise, it's pretty hard.
Jeff, are you fluent in
хорошо.
Mandarin or
Yeah,
Jeff?
no, I'm not. No, I'm not fluent. I mean, I can. The thing about Chinese is all you got to do is put the kanji, the characters, in English order. It's the same subject, verb, object.
Yeah.
So I just take
But
them. Yeah.
I mean, I know what you were saying about like the language, the linguistics being different. Like Robert Anton Wilson talked about that when he was saying like there's less like possessiveness in the Chinese language, but there is like gender, but there isn't as much. And the way that English is moving is sort of more artificial because like they're using like they as like they're using plural for singular and things like that, and it's not exactly like the same as the universal. Like I think like the ancient Chinese language is more philosophical, whereas like the English is kind of changing for artificial reasons. And some people think it's a transhumanist influence to like change the language for like political motives, whereas like the language is more philosophical in ancient China, because like I mean there was so many philosophers, but yeah, but it's interesting because also like in some of the language where like you know like in the biblical languages when they say he sometimes refers to he and she at the same time. It's just the she is more like an undertone.
Right.
But anyway, that's just one of the things I want to say about that, to see if how many languages, because you live in Japan, right? Or no, you do. Okay.
I'm in Tokyo right now. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear people's linguistics, and yeah. And the one someone had an Esperanto reference. The one thing that was funny is William Shatner is fluent in that, and he's the one that was on Star Trek because he actually had a big enough heart that he really wanted to speak the international language and play an international and an interdimensional captain. So he tried.
Transplanetary Esperanto, huh?
Yeah, but he wanted to speak the international language in case whatever aliens ever came.
Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen.
Looks like Lucas, hand raised. She's been waiting patiently.
Yes, Miluka has her hand raised.
Yeah, hi.
What a beautiful name, Miluka.
Oh, thank you. Listen, I'm just so thrilled and so inspiring about your amazing research and how wonderful you put all the thoughts together and all the intuition that comes with it. It was very refreshing to hear that. So thank you so much. I'm also Spanish, so I understand that speaking more than one language somehow make your brain think differently. And I feel kind of sad that here for many years, you know, they don't want people to speak in the school. They eliminated, you know, the bilingual programs and stuff like that. And I was saying, but this is people that have European ancestors. And in Europe, people speak several languages. And sort of in Greece and many other countries. Why we so narrow-minded that I think that, you know, English is the only expression. In fact, it's a very commercial language. Spanish is more Romance and have this kind of flavor, have more poetry when you express a thought in Spanish than in English. You know, it's a cut and dry, you know. We had choices of words to express and all that. But other than that, I was wondering what you thought about Pythagoras in his school. He always required for the students to come, they have to learn music, arts, and geometry. In fact, he taught based on symbols. It's one way to protect the knowledge, but at the same time is connected with the language of the universe, the planets, you know, music, numbers. It's all connected to our being, we are that. We don't use it, but we are that. And I'm wondering if maybe that's another way of making this, maybe the future language will be that, because, you know, when you hear the music, a symphony or any kind of beautiful, inspiring music, classical, because not the modern, that's too disturbed. And the waves are like sharp. They did a study, and classical music, the waves are round and beautiful. And if you even put plant next to it, they're supposed to survive and do better. So that connects people. Music connects people when it's that kind of music. Maybe that's another type of language.
Okay.
And the last thing I was going to say was that right now they have said that in the, what was it, in the 80s was the indigo children born.
Mhm.
And I came across children that, you know, they already know how to read and write early, during the early years. And also the crystal came in the 90s. And those take a long time to express verbally, but they communicate with the parent through telepathy. And in our teaching said that in the future, we will communicate by telepathy. So do we really need language? Or maybe this is in between a transition? What do you think?
I guess, yeah, I agree with you in many aspects of what you said. Okay, let's take first what you mentioned about music. Actually, music is said to be the universal language because you can connect in another level of that than the intellectual. But yeah, I also agree that when I think of a language of the future, I guess the language it will be obsolete. Because but for that, of course, we need that inner work and to realize our higher nature and to connect with our source. First of all, in order to be able to develop that kind of ability. Because we know if we try to develop when we are still not self-realized, it can become more like a burden or a danger. It's karmically very, very bad. But for the future of the humans, and according to the evolutionary point of view, we will reach a point in which we will be able to sense that connection with everyone, and for sure the telepathic communication will be the one that will take us to communicate with everyone. And I think that really think that since the telepathic communication does not require any kind of physical medium or physical form, it is the same for everyone. So it doesn't matter if you are from Germany, Spain, Colombia, US, or even as we were talking, if you come from another planet. The waves and the universe, it connects directly with this sound of the universe. It is the same kind of vibration of the universe. It is the same kind of force that surrounds us. It is the source of it. So we won't need to learn any other language, but only the language of the soul, of the heart, and to develop ourselves into those amazing beings that we already are, but we need to take that out and overcome the limitations of our thought, of our lower nature. But if we really could realize that right now, that will be amazing, and we will be very quickly becoming a civilization of unity, love, kindness, etc. So yes, I really think that is the language of the future, the non-verbal communication, yes, through the power of thought and sound. And thank you for your contribution, Miluka.
Thank you so much.
Judy, is it okay if we let Robert ask a question? We're almost running out of time.
Yes, of course.
Oh,
Well,
thank you.
I just wondered, well, thank you very much, by the way. I mean, wow. You use language like music, so it's most beautiful.
Oh,
Um,
that's beautiful. Thank you.
so I very much appreciate that. But I wondered if you had any thoughts about, like you're talking about telepathy, it's like people have many languages, but that there's some basis behind all of that that has to do with Vok, or, the unmanifest speech that allows us to speak many languages. There's some basis behind all the spoken languages. Is that the telepathic language, do you think, or is it something else?
Okay, from the linguistical point of view, there are many linguists that have been trying to find I don't know how to translate it in English. In Spanish, we call the semiogenesis, like the common origin of all the languages. That must be at some point, because I really believe if we know that all of us come from the same source and we all share something in common, there must have been some point before all this language got separated, like the Babel Tower of Babel show us that at the beginning there was a moment on which everyone spoke the same language. So I really believe that there must have been a point in the evolution of humanity that was, even it's in the doctrine, secret doctrine, is said that at the beginning that there was like a language that was directly conveyed from the gods to the humans, and it was like a kind of sacred language. So yes, there must be a language with those characteristics. But since due to our limited nature, we create these barriers. I guess this kind of community of unity, has dispersed somehow, and that's how the specific language have begin to appear. And with the time, of course, this differentiation becomes stronger and stronger. And we were talking that the language conveys a culture and a way of thinking, and we are still very attached to that, our identity. So I am a Latin person and I express like this, and we have this, and oh no, I'm a Slavic person, and we are like that, and our language conveys. Yeah, I guess, yes, the language carries with it a lot of cultural things, but in my opinion, they are based on this illusion of identify ourselves with the transitory things. But at some point, we came from that divine source. So at that moment, that there was that common language, in my opinion, and that's what we are called to achieve again as we evolve. We know that I like the image of thinking that we come from the source, we come down in a process of opposite to the evolution, and now we reach a point in which we are again coming back to that source with all the learning of the cycle that we have already live as race, as humanity, as part of this big world of evolution. So when we reach that point again, we will be even more aware and more evolved and more connected. So we'll be able to retrieve that initial universal language, and we will realize that ultimately everything comes from the same source. So yes, I don't know if I completely answered or understood what the question, but I guess there was a universal language, and we are meant to get again to that, but with a lot more of learning and realization of our divine nature.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Sometimes the language, and especially English is not my mother tongue. I find difficult to express certain things that I would like to say. So I'm sorry if sometimes I cannot convey all, because sometimes I guess we need this universe with this telepathy language, because otherwise it's sometimes very difficult to express all that I want to say about the wonderful things that you are bringing. So sorry for my limitations and sometimes even mistakes in the language. Thanks for your patience.
I think it's important to remember that Mr. Judge at one point says that no one would understand language if there wasn't some telepathic element to it.
Yeah, that's totally true. Actually, I have experienced that a lot here because here, they speak a lot of different languages. And there is, at the beginning when I reached here, it was very difficult for me to understand the English accent of people of South India. And at the beginning, I got into like a stress because I was very identified with my intellect. If I'm supposed to understand English and I cannot. And then one day I decided I don't care anymore. I'm just going to flow and connect with the hearts of the people. And at that moment, I began to understand. But when I was fixing why I spoke English and now I don't understand, it was like my ego getting hurt. I was not able to understand anything. Once I opened my heart and my mind, things just flew by an or nature, yes.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, technically, our time is up. I don't know are you willing to stick around another few minutes in case there's another question? Or do you have to go?
Excuse me? No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah.
Judy, second chance to answer that second question that she had. Judy, would you like to ask your question?
Oh, yes, I can't stay much longer either, but I just wondered if you could address the idea that mathematics is the most universal language. When they sent out Voyager, that was the language, and music, which of course math and music go together, but they thought that people from other planets would understand that better because it's inherent prior to the cosmos, mathematics, but yet it doesn't have sound to it. And so we have to add music. So I don't know how successful Voyager ever is going to be, but maybe it will contact some alien civilization. I just wonder what you think about that.
Oh my.
The relation of math to language.
Hello. Oh, I don't know. My internet just
could be. Yeah.
Collapsed. But am I audible? I'm sorry, Jody. I was not able to listen to the end because I don't know what happened. Sometimes here the internet fails. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, just the relationship. Mathematics is the most universal language because it's even prior to the universe, according to Plato. And this is why when they sent out Voyager, they sent out mathematics and music rather than any languages that have sound. But I mean, mathematics alone does not have sound to it, but perhaps music is mathematics in dynamic motion. So I don't know how successful Voyager will ever be, but the mention of William Shatner reminded me of it. So I just wondered if you could address this, if you have so much knowledge about this subject.
Okay, I don't know if I have enough knowledge to address specifically that, but at least in what respects to mathematics and music, music itself, it's a mathematical, it has a mathematical component to it, because I mean, when you go and see the scale, it has the half tone, the complete tone, and it's all mathematically perfect in order to produce the exact sound. So I guess, as also Miluka was pointing, that music can work as a kind of universal language through sound, through vibration, and because also it triggers another aspect of ourselves. And when Miluka, I don't know if this is very related to what you just said, Jody, because but I just remember that also there is a Japanese, or there was a Japanese person, he already died, that his name was Masaru Emoto, and he used to study the impact of the sound in small ice snowflakes. And when the music, like classical music, was played, the snowflakes used to put themselves in such a shape, perfectly geometrical shape. So that's when we can see this relationship between mathematics and music, because just by the sound of this, I don't know, the symphony of Beethoven, I don't remember which was exactly the symphony, was one of Beethoven's symphonies, and he played to the snowflakes, and when he saw in the microscope, it was like a perfect mandala with all the proportions perfectly shaped, etc. So that shows us how, on one side, music and mathematics are completely linked, and on the other side, how music is able actually to communicate, because at some point we know that by communicating we affect our reality and we affect the other one that we are communicating with. So in this case, this music was effective on a specific way. This small particle of iced water, I mean, it was water, but it was in frozen water. And yes, I mean, at least related to this, I can say that. I don't know, but maybe if someone else has another input to share with you from another point of view. Judy.
Yes,
I don't know
thank
if
you
Judy
for
is
your
there.
answer.
So,
Yes, excellent. Yes,
Well, thank you.
thanks to you, Judy.
Thank you, Catalina, for your wonderful presentation. And so your joyous optimism, really. And your presentation, I think, more than pretty much any presentation I've heard recently, was to me like just proving how optimistic the theosophy really is. It's just a big, huge affirmation of the beauty and the potential of the future. So, and which is really wonderful, because like you say, in the media, you know, it's not so much optimism, right? But theosophically, it's all optimism. It's talking about the future, and the future is bright. We just have to work it. And I love the way you said that we really have to make a foundation, because all these other attempts didn't really have the right foundation. And then so that means we have to work on ourselves, self-inquiry, and so for meditation, service, all these things. So it's a wonderful presentation, and all the smiles. That's a big clue, right? You've got a lot of smile. You got a fan base here. So
But it's the non-verbal communication.
Definitely. So wonderful. Thank you very much for getting up so early to do this. Thank you for learning all these languages, including, what did you say, Russian? No, Hindi.
No, I don't speak Russian. I tried, but I abandoned it at some point of my life. And I am trying to learn Hindi and Tamil. That is the local language of where I live, but it's very difficult.
We got Shobha here. She can speak Hindi and Tamil. Is
Oh,
Shobha
nice.
still here?
She's here.
Shobha's here.
Yeah, she's there. I saw her.
That was all about.
Face, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. The presentation for next week will be Ascent Through Love. You know, there's all these different ways of ascending and treading the path, you know, the intellectual way or the service way, etc. But so next week we'll be thinking about Ascent Through Love. It'll be what you've done is you've really laid down the foundations for that, Catalina. So
Thanks.
very much appreciated. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Thanks to you, Jonathan, in the first place, for suggesting this wonderful subject, and thanks to all of you for creating this beautiful atmosphere beyond the distances. I can feel that we are all linked some way, so it's nice to get to meet you today, and very happy to be here, very grateful with all of you. Thanks a lot.
thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. And thank you, Jonathan, and everybody.
Cool.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan.
There's Shobha right there. She was on for a minute. So, okay. All right.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.